I hope you guys really enjoyed that keynote speech. I really love it every time we get Olivier down here. He brings the coolest toys and the coolest implementations of tech. I always want to get hands-on and play with them, but he tells me not till after the keynote can you possibly touch this thing, you know. But you guys didn't come in here to hear me talk about the keynote that you just watched. You came here to learn about how we're going to leverage an identity management system, build a multi-tenant application to support potentially millions of new customers. My name is Brian Kozan. I'm a senior technical account manager. I've been at AWS for nearly 2 years. And to my right over here, the man on the tools is Nirav Doshi, also a technical account manager based from Sydney. So let's get straight into this. So Cognito, our identity management platform, allows us to manage users' profiles. Identity is core to our applications. Without identity, our users are not going to have any contextual information about what they're interacting with. We're certainly not going to be able to segment them and provide security so that the data that they're interacting with is their data. So in this case, we're going to talk about customers. Now, who is a customer? It might be my end consumers, could be partners, or perhaps it's internal employees that leverage an application within my enterprise. Identity management is nothing new. We have the standard aspects that we've always had to work with. First of all, authentication. Is this person who they say they are? Secondly, authorization. What are we going to allow this user to do? How are we going to allow them to interact with the application or data that makes sense to them? And of course, if we want to manage all of these features, we will need some sort of a back end for administrative functions to take care of this entire platform. So building this authorization infrastructure can be incredibly complex. To build an identity management system, you have to plan and provision your infrastructure that can host reliable and secure user directory. It's got to scale to support millions of users. I don't know about what kind of apps you guys are building, but millions of users are definitely going to sign up for mine. If you want it to be an easy process for users to sign up and leverage your app, you want to integrate this with your social identity platforms, right? I don't know about you, I've already got an Amazon login. I've got an enterprise directory login. My Active Directory is a SAML 2.0. I need to integrate to all of those things. And of course, the usuals, multi-factor authentication is very important. Verification of new users is something that I have to integrate. And you can see, as we start to work through what happens when we sign up for a new app, it's very complex. There's a lot to think about here. So let's take a standard workflow. Let's talk about a new user signing up for my application and the workflow that we would see in a pretty standard scenario. First, they're going to sign up. Now, this can happen generally of 2 ways. One, I present them with a form. I ask them to provide details about themselves. Username, password, email address, phone number, other details, so that that user has an identity. The second way they can log in, as we talked about, is a federated identity. I love it when an application gives me the option to use an identity that I already carry somewhere else. One less password to remember, one less password policy to deal with, one simpler situation for me as a consumer. Now, once they've signed up, we're going to drop them into an unconfirmed pool. Security is very important, and I need to validate that the information they've provided is accurate and correct. So we'll do that via a verification method. We've all received an SMS before with that one-time password. Enter this code, and we will allow you in. Perhaps it's an email with a link to click on. Verify that the email you've provided is actually your email and you are a real person. Once we've clicked on that email, we can consider this user confirmed and active. They can now interact with my application and data as they wanted to do in the first place. Now, depending on our business case or our app, we may need to include a decommissioning workflow. Perhaps we want to disable a user, or we might want to delete that user entirely. So that's our pretty standard workflow, and we still haven't touched on some of the other features that we're going to need with an identity management platform. I know I'm certainly a culprit of forgetting a password. Perhaps the password policy they asked me to use was too onerous and complex, so I put in some extra characters and totally forgot what those are. Failed to put it into my password management program because I was busy and I need to reset my password. I would really like that to be self-service, because I'll tell you what, if I have to call or email somebody, I'm just going to give up and go somewhere else. Of course, we may import users. I've already got identities, and I want to import users into my new system, which will require them to reset a password and verify that the information we have about that user is correct. Wrap all of that up with a back-end management platform, and we can see that even a standard workflow of a new user coming on can get quite complex quite quickly. Enter Cognito. We now have the ability, fully managed, to manage millions of users across both our web and mobile applications. So what does this consist of? We've got a couple of components, major components to work with. First is our managed user pools. Fully managed system of record for user credentials and profile. We can use a user pool as our single source of truth to manage millions of users in the application, including the full life cycle of user membership. Sign up, sign in, sign out, email and phone verification, multi-factor authentication, and we've got a couple of advanced features that we're going to see a little bit later with Nirav, such as risk-based adaptive authorization and built-in application load balancer integration, which is really good. We can use our identity pools, which is our federated access. So these identity pools allow us to use Cognito to federate our Googles, our Facebooks, our Amazons, and Twitters, and use these public IDPs to authenticate users, and then trade that authentication for tokens and credentials that allow us to interact with our AWS backend services. So now I'm leveraging Cognito to enable my developers to actually operate inside my AWS environment as well. Again, the identity provider platform is not something that I have to build or manage. We do all of this with standard tokens. If we've used OAuth 2 tokens before, JSON web tokens, that's very familiar, it's very extensible, we can use it with a lot of our applications. That's what we leverage as well. So in addition to the backend, we've made sure to give you a quick and simple hosted UI as well. So whether it's that sign-in page or that reset password page, we provide that out of the box so that you can get started very, very quickly with this identity management system. Of course, we support all modern frameworks, and you can develop on any mobile platform of your choice. Here's just a few of our OIDC providers. I have a customer that has spent a lot of time, does have millions and millions of users, and they've put a lot of time and investment into Auth0, which is a really wonderful tool. They've got Auth0 working for them beautifully. Now, as we discussed before, this customer doesn't need to go and reinvent the wheel and move all of their millions of users to Cognito and make it work for them. Instead, they can still authenticate with their Auth0 and leverage Cognito to trade that for a credential, temporary credential to interact with your AWS services or application. There's some other really popular ones there. Okta, I know, is very popular amongst some of my larger customers, and they provide a lot of services and features that are important. So how does this actually look? What if I actually want to integrate Cognito Identity Platform with my applications in AWS? Let's take our first example of a serverless application. Most serverless applications will be fronted by our API gateway. So I have my application, and it authenticates against Cognito and is given back a JSON web token. I then put that JSON web token into the header when I call my API gateway. API gateway recognizes that that payload is in the header and uses a Cognito authorizer on the back end, easily integrated, to check that that user is valid and has an active session. If Cognito replies with a success message, it will allow that user to continue their flow into the backend infrastructure that makes up my app. But what if my application is hosted on a fleet of EC2 instances? Perhaps I've got EC2 instances fronted by an application load balancer. I can implement just about the exact same workflow with the click of a button. This is a very simple integration so that when my authenticated user hits my application load balancer, the application load balancer will find that token, pass it to my Cognito authorizer, receive a success message, and then allow that workflow to continue on to my backend application. So we're going to get a quick demo of that and see just how integrated this is. So we'll pass over to Nirav to see what we've got built.
Thank you, Brian. What we have here is a simple application. I'll be showing you that all it does is it takes the request, extracts the headers, and displays the headers back. This application is running on an EC2 instance, which is part of a target group. The target group is associated with this standard application load balancer. So every request that the application load balancer receives gets forwarded to this target group. I have two listeners out here. One is an HTTP listener. All it does is forwards all the requests to HTTPS. and the HTTPS request here, HTTPS listener here, which has the following rules. If the incoming request has a path of a /auth, there is an additional check that I do for the sake of this demonstration, which will authenticate this user against a Cognito user pool. If there is no /auth, if for all the other requests that come in, all the other requests get routed straight without having an authentication, and they will just work. To just show you how we've configured the /auth, the path, if the request comes in with a /auth, we want it to authenticate with Amazon Cognito. It also offers you to use an OIDC ID provider. We are using Cognito user pools over here. This is the user pool we've configured, and this is the application client that we have. To take a look at how this application runs, this is how it would be. When I run this app, please note I have not used the /auth here. Sorry if it is not visible out there, but I've not added the path /auth. What shows up here is all the headers that were passed as part of this request. You would not see any authentication or token-specific headers out here. Now, the moment I add the /auth, this is when Cognito requires you to be a logged-in user. When I hit this, I am presented with a hosted login screen here. You can see that we have added a DevDay Australia logo, which is, again, customization of the standard hosted UI that Cognito provides. I will log in here with the credential. This is a user I have already created in the user pool. Later on, we'll see how we add new users as well. There, now that I have logged in, you can see that this is an auth page. It does have a referrer. The referrer right now is Amazon Cognito. And further down, there is an access token. This is the access token which has been given to me by Cognito. This tells my application that this is an authenticated user. If I take this token and if I decode the token, I should see the payload of my user who has just logged in. This is how the payload looks like. It clearly tells that the issuer of this token is Cognito IDP. I have the token use as access. It's an OpenID token, and this is the user I have. The username starts with a 80A and 778. And if you noticed what I logged in as, this is what that user is in my pool. This is 80A, ends with a 778 there. And I logged in with my email address as Nirav Didi plus ALB1. Back to you.
Thanks, Nirav. That is incredibly easy. Literally create a rule in there and tell it I would like to authorize this user, and the integration takes care of the rest. Imagine building that on your own. That is a lot of code, not to mention you might be putting some of that heavy lifting on your application servers themselves. So as mentioned before, we can also use these Cognito authorizations to access our AWS services. Let's take a little bit closer look at how that works. So Cognito Identity Pool generates a unique identifier for every single user. So let's imagine our application is already authenticated against Cognito and has a token. We can go up to that Cognito Identity Pool and actually trade that token for AWS temporary credentials, which will allow us fine-grained access to only the resources that we give access to via IAM policies. So regardless of which device they're using, the unique identifier stays the same. So you can map this identity across different platforms and devices. You can use it as a partitioning device in your application, and it's even available to be used as a policy variable in your IAM policies. This is really, really powerful that I can use that user ID as a policy variable for IAM. I can create very, very fine-grained access control to whatever service my application is going to have us access in the back end. Maybe it's S3, maybe I only want to give access to specific DynamoDB tables. And I can do all of that simply by leveraging Cognito as my authorizer. So we've got another demo app. Nirav has built us a simple to-do list. It's all hosted on a static S3 bucket. The way it works is we are going to navigate to this bucket, and we will be asked to either register or log in. If we log in, we'll pass our username and password off to Cognito, and assuming I've put in my username and password correctly, I'll be issued an identity token. That ID token gets passed back to my application, and my application can then put that token in every single header request to my API gateway. As we talked about before, the API gateway will find that token in the header, and it will leverage a Cognito authorizer back to Cognito to make sure that this user is valid and has an active session. And if it returns a success message, we can then flow on through the rest of our application, which in the case of our to-do list is a Lambda function posting our to-do list objects to a DynamoDB table. So we're going to switch over to Nirav, and we're going to have a look at that demo now.
Thank you again, Brian. This is the to-do user pool that we see. I have 7 different users. These are users which have already been created. We are not going to use any of these. I'm just going to show creating a new user, and then we'll see that user appear over here. This is the simple to-do list app. What you're seeing here is the static page that is hosted out of S3, as we just discussed with Brian earlier. You can see at this stage, there is no ID token. The ID token is null. I'm going to register as a new user. I am going to provide my email address. I'm going to provide a phone number. We do not validate the phone number. That's really why I'm just going to give in some number, which should be good enough, and a password. After I have registered successfully, the system sends me a verification for my email address. I'm going to just pull out that confirmation and use that to confirm my registration. With the demo gods supporting us, the email should arrive in a couple seconds.
Now, Nirav, in that case, you're verifying your email. But if I wanted to, could I also add a check so that I have to verify my phone number as well?
Yes, you can include, you can just, with a checkbox, you can enable email verification as well as phone verification. Phone verification can be a lot more stronger. It also allows you better MFA control.
Cool.
So let's just sign back in, and not sign back in. Let's try to verify ourselves as we registered. This is a confirm, I am in. Whatever we saw, all the interaction that the website did to get a user registered, to get a verification done, everything we've still been doing with Cognito. We've not even interacted with our backend until now. After my login, and you can still see this still has an empty ID token. We have still not received a token. As soon as we log in, there we see an ID token. The ID token is a confirmation that the user is an authenticated user. This is a user now which exists in the user pool. We'll take a look at this user. I'm sure a lot of you would be interested to see how the to-do list works. So let's just try something over here. Let's say I'm going to write code. I'm going to comment my code. I'm going to create a Git repo. I'm going to commit it, commit the code to the repo, and I'm going to push to the remote repo. All these activities, creating an individual new item in the to-do list, is all being done with my backend. The backend receives the token as part of its request. With that, it knows which user this is, and it knows that this is a valid user, a valid session. I can remove items, and I can add more items, and you can see that in all cases, we have the ID token associated with it. To take a look at the ID token, here we go to jwd.io, and if we decode this token, we have the user that we registered with. This is the same user who has a verified email address, and the issuer is Cognito IDP. Let's just have a quick look back at the users we had. If I refresh the screen here, I should now have a new user. There is my new user, which is what we had registered a while ago. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Nirav. So not only did we authenticate that user, register that user, authenticate that user, get a token back, but then we use that token throughout the back end of our application to identify him as a unique user.
Yes.
That was all pretty straightforward and simple. So that's really, really good. But now let's talk about how we can actually customize this workflow, right? Sometimes we need to add checks and controls at various stages during this workflow. We're all developers here, so we're not really content with the way things come out of the box, I hope. So Lambda hooks to the rescue. We know how powerful Lambda can be. What if I can have Lambda interact with this flow at various stages? Let's see what that might look like. So here we are, back to our standard user flow from sign up to decommissioning. What kind of checks and balances might I put in here? Well, we talked earlier about, say, importing users to our user pool. So if we do that, we need to actually skip the registration, do a transparent registration, and put them straight into the unconfirmed so that they can verify. Maybe I have information about this user in other databases or other areas of my business. And once they've signed up, I've realized that I know something about this user, and I'd like to provide them with a post-login message that's customized to hopefully drive more engagement from that user instantly. So I can do custom logic using Lambda on that sign up, and then provide back a message to that user that's customized to their context. Of course, we all know CAPTCHA. We've all verified that we are not a robot before, and a very standard place for these CAPTCHA hooks to happen is during sign-in. But if I wanted to move this to, say, my sign-up stage, and I wanted to trigger during sign-up to make sure that I didn't have bots registering and being unconfirmed users in my database forever and ever and ever, I can simply move those hooks to the sign-up stage. So I get a huge amount of customizability, and I can determine both pre and post each stage what I might want to do with this user, all with AWS Lambda. Of course, the back-end heavy lifting is all done for you. We did talk as well about that front end, that hosted UI. We give you all the building blocks needed right out of the box that you can get people to register, reset password, and do those verifications with the click of a button. These are provided to you and integrated straight to your Cognito identity pool or user pool very, very simply. Now, we're all developers in the room, so hopefully we know about AWS Amplify, our open source JavaScript libraries that make it even easier to develop all of this front end to make this workflow beautiful and simple to our user. Not only can we use it to integrate to Cognito, but we can use it for analytics, push messaging, storage on the back end and databases. The Amplify library gives you all of the building blocks you need to build out that front end very, very simplified, and it's all open source available on GitHub. The AWS Mobile Hub service is the way that I built my first mobile application. I'm not a mobile developer, but I was keen to put something on my Android phone. So I went to Mobile Hub and I started a new project, and I literally checked the boxes of the kind of functionality that I wanted that application to have, such as user sign-in with Cognito, such as push messaging with Amazon Pinpoint, which came with a lot of analytics for user engagement as well. I was using S3 on the back end for storage and DynamoDB for saving some general information about the way I was interacting with the app. Through Mobile Hub, I checked all of those boxes. I told it the features I wanted my mobile application to have, and it generated all the code that I needed to import into my IDE and start customizing and building out my application logic. It really was that easy, and I was impressed, as not being a mobile developer, how awesome this works. So an identity management platform is really only good as it is secure. So we've got a few advanced security features with Cognito. One is we can detect if these credentials, a user's credentials, may have been compromised elsewhere, and we can block that user's sign-in. Furthermore, we can identify suspicious activity and then use adaptive authentication, or step-up authentication, to force a user to use MFA if their access patterns are or deviate from what we normally see. So we're going to see another awesome demo where Nirav plays the role of a deviant and shows us just what can happen if we identify him as a high-risk user.
Thank you for that. You've raised the bar. Cool. So we're going to take a look at the ALB pool. This is the same pool that we used when we saw the demo of the application load balancer. This user pool, I have enabled advanced security features. What it allows me to quickly start with is a simple whitelist and a blacklist. This is standard, nothing new, nothing major. The next, I have the option to determine an action if the system identifies my user has compromised credentials. I want the user to be blocked, and which actions do I want him to be blocked at? I want him to be blocked at sign in, sign up, or a password change. These I can customize. After trying to sign in, if the system detects that the user trying to sign in is a medium risk or a high risk user, you have the option here to configure the user to be forced into giving an MFA. How many times that you've seen when you are signed into a certain service, when you switch the device, the service makes you sign in again with an MFA. This is the exact same feature where because you are signing in from something which we've not noticed you sign in from, we force you to give an MFA. This will also generate a notification. A notification will be sent out to the user, and the user has the option to take up the MFA. To give you an example instead, this was the user which I was testing with when I was trying this out in my hotel room. The hotel has an insecure Wi-Fi, and this user was blocked a couple times, identified as this is a potential risk. The account was being targeted. It is supposed to be an account takeover risk, and it was forced into an MFA.
So this is still in progress because you didn't finish that MFA process, is that correct?
Yes, because our pool does not have a phone MFA enabled. I did not proceed with the MFA verification, but this is how it blocked my attempt, did not allow me to proceed further.
Cool. And we're also notified about that, so as a user, I can take action and tell it, you know what, I am not a high-risk user, I'm just in a new place. And once I validate that and put in my challenge, I will just go along my happy way. So it's a very nice, seamless experience for our users. Thanks, Nirav.
Thank you.
Awesome. So look, I hope you guys learned something about identity management. And if there's something that I want you to learn, it's that I don't see huge value in developing out a massive identity platform. I would prefer to build apps that are going to give value to my users and consumers, whether they're internal or external, to want to interact with my application. Identity management is something that should happen in the background and isn't heavy lifting that I personally want to perform as a developer. It is super quick and easy, and it integrates with all of your AWS services that you're currently building with and really simplifies your workflow, as well as remove some of the burden of you developing all of those features and functions that you haven't thought about until a user gets locked out and is calling your help desk and causing everybody more time and grief. Of course, we can federate with all of our current social ID federations, which makes life very, very easy. And when I can customize not only my workflows, but customize the UIs as well so that my customer gets a nice normal look and feel that they expect from my application. This is a really, really good story to leverage Cognito and not worry about scaling my identity platform. I can just focus on my application. So thank you guys very, very much for coming. I really hope you enjoyed this session. If you want a bit more information, make sure you tap your QR code on the way out the door, and you'll be emailed with more information and resources and links to help you get started leveraging, whether it be AWS Amplify, Mobile Hub, or just Cognito directly. And we're very, very keen on your feedback. Every one of these sessions is built directly off of feedback that you guys give us, similar to all of the services that you find in your console. So please do take a minute to give us some feedback. We will read every single word of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.